Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Happy Recap Podcast, week 3 of our revised and rebooted and revived and all those different R words podcast. I'm glad to be with you. I'm JB along with EJ in the booth today, and our special guest will be joining us a little later, Colin Cosell, one of the co-voices that you hear over the PA system at CitiField. He'll be talking about how it'll be this year without fans and just some general great things that he has going on, and hopefully maybe get him to tell a story or two about his rather famous grandfather as well. That's coming up later in the program, but EJ, certainly lots of good signs that we've seen over the last week. Starting a little bit off the field as far as the testing goes with the COVID. You certainly had a couple players around baseball test positive, most notably Yasiel Puig, who was going to be going into Braves camp and now won't be. But the numbers have been very, very, very low. And I think that kind of gave us one of the most important green lights. We could see that opening day looks like, barring some sort of major outbreak, is going to happen, and it's going to happen, and I say this quotation marks, on time.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that is the case. That it sounds like we are green lit for Friday, and with the Mets in particular. I think one of the biggest surprises of this week was not only the return of Robinson Cano to camp, but a fully active return, and in fact, even in the lineup last night, which I don't think any of us were anticipating. But I guess the rumor mill regarding him and COVID is probably proven untrue. Yeah, we have seen a couple cases spring up here in baseball, but I thought I read somewhere that the overall percentages are way lower than what we're seeing across the country. And while it's certainly a possibility that they do have to shut down at some point, it seems like right off the bat, and we saw it in the exhibition game last night, there's a decent amount of social distancing taking place. Obviously, the game's going to look and sound and feel a lot different, but it sounds like we are greenlit to go for opening day, and hopefully no lengthy delays inevitably.
You know, one of the things that'll be more interesting, because it does affect the Mets, and developed yesterday when the country of Canada said to the Blue Jays playing any home games this year in Toronto. The most likely outcome for them is that they play at the home of their AAA affiliate, which is in Buffalo, a stadium that there are quite a few Met farm system products still know that stadium because we certainly had AAA there for quite some time.
Yeah, the hypocrisy of the Canadian government on this one is it knows no ends, because they won't allow the Blue Jays to play baseball games up at their home stadium, but they're allowing the NHL to bring all 12 Eastern Conference playoff participants of the hockey league to come on up, and they're actually going to host all 12 teams. So it's kind of funny when it comes to hockey, Canada says okay.
You know, and I'm certainly not going to get into the politics of it. It does feel like it was more of a political move than a sports move. But the one thing that I feel pretty good about it, the Mets have said that they're going to trust their players. And so far that trust is paying off, in that, we haven't heard, hey, I went out for a burger after the game and caught some COVID with a side of fries. But the reality is, Toronto, if you were caught out after the game, that was a $750,000 fine, albeit Canadian dollars, so it's only $50 American. Okay, a little bit more than that, but you get the picture that the rules up there are quite a bit more sturdy than what the other teams were doing. And maybe it's just for the best that we allow them to handle things in their way while we play some ball down here.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool to have the novelty of a team coming back into New York. It's going to be the first time since, I think I read, 1947, where we'll have 3 teams, when we had the Giants, the Dodgers, and obviously the Yankees playing in New York. So it'll be a cool novelty. We know there's good baseball fans up there. We've had a franchise up there before in the minor league affiliates. So it will be a cool little – there's a lot of quirky little novelties that are going on around baseball because of this unfortunate pandemic. And if this is the byproduct of it as well, let's give it a shot. Toronto better be careful. Who knows? Maybe they end up loving it.
And I think the reality of it is Vlad Guerrero Jr. will turn out being the best major league ball player in Buffalo since Roy Hobbs.
Right. Yeah. It'll be pretty exciting for the people of Buffalo to get to check him out as he continues to progress in his major league career.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. Meanwhile, we've seen two covered games at this point. We're recording this on Sunday morning, the 19th, or Sunday afternoon, depending on what coast you're on. But we've seen two games. We've got the one tonight against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. Mets played the Yankees last night at CitiField. We'll certainly talk about that. And then the scrimmage that was broadcast on the internet on YouTube on Thursday evening, where the Mets, rather confusingly, of course, played the Mets. I'm starting to get a little bit of a feel for this team. The one thing I thought was funny, though, EJ, and I think it was really kind of comical. I mean, we're not here to talk about fan reactions on the internet, but people were taking last night's game very seriously. And it really was kind of weird in a sense, seeing what I would call a Port St. Lucie caliber game, because what it is exhibition season in CitiField. You felt like you were dealing with a mid-spring training game because you had a lot of lineup changes once the sixth inning or so rolled around. And it was definitely an odd bird, but there were some really good positives last night. And the biggest one for me really was the triumvirate of Betances, Familia, and Diaz looked pretty good last night.
Yeah, they look great, and obviously, as everybody said, those guys are going to be what makes this team go round. We're going to hit, we're going to pitch well starting wise, but those guys have to come to form. And I thought it was great that we were just seeing balls hit very limply off the bats of the opponents that we were facing from the Yanks. They looked good. The velocity was there. I mean, Diaz looked completely, his form looked like it had reverted. It was like last year hadn't happened at all. So seeing those guys have some success in their first outing was really inspiring, and just having baseball back was really inspiring. As I said on Twitter yesterday afternoon, last night was an exhibition game that felt nothing like an exhibition game based on the anticipation of getting to the game. All day long, I was kind of checking the clock, just almost willing a Saturday away because I just wanted to see how it would all play off, and it was really, really cool. I enjoyed watching last night, and I can't wait to watch tonight.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. Although it's funny, as I was looking ahead towards the week and towards opening day on Friday, normally it would be a day where I'd look at my schedule, look at my work day, and go, okay, is this a day I can take off so I can sit at home and watch a ball game? And more, of course, the situation we're all in now, thanks to the COVID, with many of us working from home, is okay. How can I rearrange my work day around opening days so that I can be done early and watch the ball game, because it's 10 feet from my office to the TV. So I mean, it's definitely a different feeling and a different situation, but it's gotten me excited for opening day. Hearing Gary, Keith, and Ron out there again was perfect, even though it was socially distanced with them in separate booths. I thought they did a fantastic job calling the game in what'll be less than ideal circumstances. Tonight will be extremely interesting because, of course, they'll be at CitiField, and we'll be using the Yankee feed for video, etc., which is basically what they were doing last night on Yes, and calling the game remotely, which Howie did yesterday. Although Howie found out, I guess, the delay is not great when watching the video feed from the stadium. It's something like 8 to 10 seconds. So that, but they're pros. They're going to do a great job calling the game. And I tell you, those voices, they were my voices of summer, these days. And so, I mean, it almost felt normal. It almost felt normal. And I'll be honest, I did not notice the lack of a crowd all that much.
I didn't either. I actually found myself, I got a little annoyed at one point at the pumped in crowd noise, because I've always said, the Mets sent out a survey a few years ago about, would you attend an old-fashioned ball game? No glaring lights, no pomp and circumstance. It was just going to be an organist, and that would be the only sounds of the ballpark. So I was actually kind of enjoying the early innings where it was a little quieter than when they started pumping in some of the crowd noise. But Gary, Keith, and Ron, having them back was just awesome. It definitely did lend itself to a sense of normalcy that we've sorely been missing. One of my buddies had a pretty good line. He was like, oh, look, the Jocks shoved the AV kid into a separate locker because Gary was the one who was distanced. I even tweeted out at one point, I even missed you at Steve Gelbs. So it definitely gave us a little sense of normalcy last night that was sorely missed. I had my mom texting me, Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows of my father and my ongoing familia-related texts, but for even my mom to be texting me that, hey, I hope you're watching this game, it was kind of just like everybody just needed a little bit of last night, and I had a blast watching it. I didn't even care about the outcome of the game. I cared about individual performances. I like what we saw out of Porcello for a bottom of the rotation guy. That's exactly the kind of performance you want to get out of him, particularly with some sloppy defense behind him. It was definitely a bunch of encouraging signs that I took away from last night.
Yeah, it's funny. You talk about the game, the text. I mean, a lot of people tweeting at me last night. I had a couple of tweets that kind of blew out my mentions at some point during the evening, including when I retweeted out that famous photo of Will Ferrell that says, "Reminder: these games do not count." I had gotten a text last night during the game from the PA announcer, one of the spring training PA announcers for the Cardinals, telling me the game was on. I'm just like, really? You think I didn't know? But it was really cool to see that baseball fans are thinking of each other, going, "I found this game. You should know about it." But you talk about the crowd noise. I don't know. You and I have both watched some KBO games on ESPN. With the crowd noise pumped in there, it feels like that they are just a more background murmur, less reactionary than I'm seeing the American stadiums using theirs. Is that a fair analysis, or do you recall them being a little bit more interactive? Because it doesn't feel like there's a tremendous amount of cheers to individual occurrences. It just sounds like it's meant to sound like there's always people there.
Yeah, the KBO definitely had more of like a hum to it, as opposed to the ovationist roar that we heard a couple times last night, and at some odd times too. There was like a routine fly ball to left field that, when fielded, was met with a rousing ovation. I believe Keith even made reference to it on the broadcast. It seemed odd, some of the reactions, and they're going to have to figure out when to react to certain things, because if you're at CitiField, I don't necessarily know a CitiField crowd is going to lose their mind when a Yankee hits a 2-run homer against us, and that was the case as well last night. So they'll figure it out. That's what these games are a part of. The early weeks of the season will be a part of. I'm sure they'll get it down, but I agree. I didn't love the rousing ovation. We heard it a few times. I prefer just the kind of the dull hum that we've heard with the KBO.
The funny thing too, though, is especially when it comes to radio, I discovered this, of course, back in the in 2000 World Series, and then in some of the interleague games since, is whether it's CitiField or Yankee Stadium, it's sometimes actually really hard to tell who the home crowd is because of the audience, and you could get 10,000 people going nuts for a Clint Frazier home run at CitiField, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the case. I've attended my fair share of Subway Series games, and that has been the unfortunate byproduct of them. Is a lot of times, if the Mets are taking a whipping, it sounds like a very pro-home crowd, but it won't negate the fact that I still had my greatest in-ballpark moment ever, which couldn't happen in this current climate of the DH, which was Mr. Koo off Randy Johnson, which was the most fun 60 seconds I think I've ever spent in a ballpark.
It's funny. I don't say this to you very often, but I was at that game. That was my 30th birthday. And my best friend stood in line outside of Shea Stadium for 8 hours the day tickets went on sale to get those tickets. And we were barely in the stadium. I mean, upper deck, 4 seats from the end out in left field, and we were barely in the stadium, but we were there. And the coup, that was some of my favorite Shea Stadium memories. That and the 10-run inning, those are probably my 2 favorite Shea Stadium innings right there.
Yeah. Like I said,
stuff.
Unfortunately, that couldn't happen with the DH today. But I did see a pretty interesting tweet/poll that I think it was Baseball America sent out about a topic we discussed on here last week. Is it was what team is best equipped in the National League to have the designated hitter, and it was overwhelmingly, the response was the Mets first, Dodgers second, and the Reds third. But it was an overwhelming response that the Mets are best suited to have that designated hitter in place now.
Yeah, and I think that's, you look at the options that they have going on. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do tonight. The lineups are not out yet, but there was talk that Cespedes was going to see action in the field. So I don't know if we'll see Cano back there. I don't know if we'll see Dom Smith back there. I'd like to see Dom personally. I mean, obviously, there's always the possibility you'll see JD in there. But I think those are kind of the three you'll see the most of. And depending on Cano's health and how it holds up out there at second base, I mean, I think you're going to see, really kind of three people, bouncing back between DH and left field in kind of a rotation of three. It depends. Now, if Cano's wheels turn up a little lame, then I think, it becomes a little more confusing situation. But my goodness, what a wonderful problem to have, as opposed to figuring out which bench guy is going to be our DH. Or which slugger is going to be our DH and which guy who can't hit a lick is going to be out in the field.
Right. And you also could throw in, hey, Jed Lowry could end up being a wild card here. I don't put a lot of stock into him being healthy, but they're sounding like he's going to go for it. And certainly that could be a role for him to fill as well. So it will be interesting to see how they configure tonight. It'll be interesting to see just who they even send tonight. I thought the Yankees were pretty accommodating yesterday in sending some of their big boppers that we all kind of wanted to see. So I would expect that the Mets to do somewhat of the same. I don't expect the full starting lineup to be there, the opening day starting lineup to be there tonight, but I think the Mets will be somewhat accommodating as to who they send tonight, and it'll be interesting to see once those lineups get posted.
I would imagine you'll see McNeil after him getting the night off last night, and I think it's probably a no-brainer that we see Pete as well, for sure, because it just doesn't seem like he ever wants to take a night off.
Right, and we all know Cano's history. Given he's a little creakier now, a little older now, but he doesn't like to come out of that lineup. So it'll be interesting to see how Louis handles it. You got Louis, actually, I thought did a very good job last night, moving through the pitching changes and handling the team the way that he did. I thought he had a very good, solid initial performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to switch gears here as we bring in our guest who, along with Marcel Castro, is one of the voices of CitiField. He spent the extra offseason recording call-ups for the fans and turning that into a venture that helps give a little back in this time of COVID, the immensely fun NowOnDeck.com. He's going to be at the mic for opening day. Please welcome Colin Cosell. That's it. Look,
hey, guys, how are we doing?
There we go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Definitely can hear you now, yes.
Hey, wouldn't you believe it? I speak for a living and I can't get audio going.
Working in radio, I can identify.
Yeah, that's always a good, solid way to start. It's like opening up the mic to welcome everyone to CitiField and all the volumes off. It's just perfect.
So talk a little bit about, you had a very different offseason, just getting ready and warmed up down in Port St. Lucie. We go into this extra break. Talk a little bit about how you got into this idea of recording call-ups for the fans.
Well, that started back in 2018. I had just finished up my first season with the Mets. And basically, I wanted to find a way to connect with the fans, and to do so, I figured, why not record some ballpark style call-ups, and that way they become a little more familiar with me, because Alex Anthony had been at the helm for over 15 years, and there were obviously some growing pains. So I just figured it was a way to connect with the fans, and it was great. Had nice little feedback and requests come in, and it's about over 90 that came in overall. And so when the pandemic struck, and it was Saturday, March 14th, and in New York, stay-at-home orders were coming in, I figured, you know what, we all kind of came to the realization that baseball was possibly not going to happen at all. We definitely knew it was postponed indefinitely, and I wished I was in the booth, and I know fans wished they were at the ballpark. So what better way to connect once again and kind of keep that baseball feel going than to resurrect Call Me Up Colin. So I put it out on Twitter, and the rest is history.
I think everybody was kind of wondering whether or not baseball was even going to happen at all this year. We've speculated a lot about that. So after you get shut down, spring training is no more. Everyone's staying at home orders in New York. Were you optimistic that we would even have a season at all, or were you kind of taking it cautiously that it might not actually happen?
So it's kind of funny. I was on vacation. Everything worked out timing wise. I mean, like down to the 11th hour. I was down at spring training. I called games on March 3rd and 4th. I was back in New York on the 5th. One of the other teams I PA announced for the New York Riptide in the National Lacrosse League. Had a game with them on Saturday the 7th. On Sunday the 8th, I flew out to California with my wife. They have an annual family kind of vacation at Disneyland. And we were a little hesitant to go, given the circumstances, but we're ahead of the game in the sense that we socially distanced and we were Purelling our hands before and after every ride. And it was great. But while I was there, they announced they were shutting down spring training and suspending baseball indefinitely. And so that was a very hard pill to swallow, because any pandemic or any outbreak that has happened in my lifetime has always been controlled, and it's always been kind of squashed before it could turn into what it's turned into. And I held on to hope that that was going to be the case. And then when they canceled it, it became the harsh realization that this is real and it's not going away. So I had to kind of make my peace with it and also try to enjoy vacation. And then we flew back on Friday the 13th. No irony lost there. And then everything, Disneyland was actually shut down the very next day, and as was New York. And so I spent the next, week or so, or 2 weeks, just making my peace with the fact that there was not going to be a baseball season. There was not going to be sports this year. And for someone who works in sports and as an avid sports fan, that was another really tough pill to swallow. So I made my peace with the idea that there was not going to be a baseball season. So when they announced they were going to restart, I was very skeptical, because in my mind, I said, there's no way they're going to be able to pull this off. And then driving to the ballpark this past Thursday to get a little warm up, I called the inter-squad game between the Mets and the Mets. Pulling up to the ballpark, it was like, wow, this is really happening. And then getting into the booth, it suddenly became a case of I've never been so happy to be so wrong.
Now, we saw the game last night, which you were not at. That was Matasol's game,
Yes.
But we saw from obviously the SNY booth has had some changes in the accommodations they need to make as far as social distancing, etc. Talk a little bit about from your standpoint. What is going to be different for you this year, including the fact that I know that you are a big person who believes in playing off crowd energy. That's not going to be there.
Right. So the protocol they have in place is very strict and brings a great sense of comfort. I'll be all alone in my booth, as opposed to the previous years where three of us are packed into a tiny little box in front of the window. So that will allow me to take my mask off and not sound muffled when I announce, and I'll have my windows open as well. If anyone wants to come into the booth, they have to knock. That allows me a chance to put my mask back on, and I basically just kind of slide it down for announcements and then put it back on anyway. I'm very super cautious when it comes to this thing, because I think it's something that people really do need to take seriously, far more seriously in the other 40 states. That was just a slight nudge at the rest of the country. But yeah, then people are allowed to come in but not go past the doorway, and everyone has masks on at all times. So that aspect of it, that's obviously very different. And yes, for me, the thing that I love the most about this job is the synergy between myself and the crowd. And when I say Pete Alonso's name, I know they're all going to go nuts. And in that moment, we're in it together, and it really, that's my bread and butter. Like that's the thing I love most about the job. So to not have that directly is, it's an adjustment. But we did pipe in the crowd sound. We had an ambient sound of crowd noise as kind of a bed that played through the entire game. And just hearing that, when I'm looking at my phone or looking at notes or getting ready for the next announcement, that brought a sense of comfort for sure. And we do have a whole slew of sound effects to react to different aspects of the game, be it huge cheers for a home run, groans over a misplay or a bad call, and of course, big cheers for whenever the home batters are up at bat when they call their name. So, I mean, obviously it's artificial, but it's better than absolute silence.
Well, from a logistical standpoint, did you guys actually have to have like an in-stadium production meeting as to when and where and what's the appropriate times to use certain crowd noises, certain sound effects? Did you guys powwow this, or are you kind of just feeling it out as you go along?
I was not privy to it. I know they were. Our production crew is the most talented group of human beings I've ever worked with in my entire career, and they leave no stone unturned. So they got it down to even having a "Let's Go Mets" chant in their arsenal of sound effects. So I am certain they sat down, had a huge powwow over it, and figured out every possible scenario, every possible sound effect they'd need, and made sure they got them all in place.
So as far as what do you see? Because obviously your role in a normal season is to inform the fans and, as necessary, use the energy in that information to pump them up a little bit more. What do you kind of see as your role in this, for the fan? Because I mean, unfortunately, a lot of times the crowd mics on broadcast are not loud enough to hear everything you're saying. What do you kind of see? Do you feel like you're catering more to the player this season because of the scenario, or are you still trying to be as fan friendly as possible on the mic?
I'm trying to be as fan friendly as possible on the mic, because I know that without the normal noises and sounds that come from a ball game, they're going to be able to hear me very well at home. And that was the case before this even happened, when there were fans in the stands. My wife, Julia, she would, if I got to work and I was immediately, running around or had to record some VOs or what have you, and didn't get a chance to give her a call and let her know I was safe, because, we're that kind of adorable couple. She would know by turning on the TV, she'd hear me in the background and know that I was at work safely, which is kind of a cool aspect of this job that people don't really think about. It's like, oh, I don't even have to check in because she can hear me. So I know that fans are listening. I know this because on Thursday, we weren't on SNY, but we had it live streamed on YouTube and on our Facebook page. And Mike Janella, by the way, did the play-by-play and color commentary. He did the whole thing, and he did a bang-up job. He was absolutely amazing. He's one of our in-game hosts who's multi-talented. But at any rate, I had people tweeting at me and some fans that I'm friends with texting me, saying, I love Max Moroff. He's one of my favorite people in the system, or Cespedes is coming up to bat. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm actually calling him up for the first time in my career, which is kind of crazy. And so I put a little extra oomph on it, from time to time, and people could hear it. So I know they're listening. I know they're not in front of me. And look, I just I treat it kind of like doing radio. It's my favorite medium. You never see your audience, but they're listening. So you're doing your job for an unseen audience, and that's just the way I'm going to have to treat this season.
So from a logistical standpoint, we had Justin Toscano of NorthJersey.com on with us last week, and he kind of ran through what the logistical check-in is for him and the beat guys. How is it for you now, from the time you pull up to the stadium to the time you actually get in the booth?
Every single person has to go through the same exact entrance. It's in Lot A. It's the main employee parking lot. By the loading dock, so the side that's facing LaGuardia and facing the Grand Central. We go through the first thing you do. There's a checkpoint. They take your temperature, ask a bunch of questions pertaining to COVID symptoms, any quarantine, any previous infection, so on, and then from there they give you a day pass instead of my regular. My Mets card and lanyard. So that signifies where you're allowed to go in the ballpark. They're very strict about that. And then from there are checkpoints. There's people placed by every elevator to ensure that no more than one person per elevator goes in, to make sure that you're going the right direction, that you're not going somewhere near the players or something like that. So I'm fairly certain that should be exactly what he went through as well.
So we have a great team of in stadium voices for the Mets at this point. And so how do you and your partner decide who does what game and how that's going to work? And has that changed at all because of this COVID riddled season?
I mean, it was funny. While I was on vacation, it was that Monday, the 9th. I sat at my computer after we got back from dinner and I just typed up our schedule. We went through it. Marisol is an extremely busy woman. She's an anchor for Pix 11 from 9 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. She's got a cooking show coming up on PBS. I mean, she's all over the place. So basically weekends were her only true availability. And so we kind of divvied it up so that she would have weekends, I'd have weekdays, which worked out well because then I could spend time with my wife on the weekends. And we just got a puppy. So that made the most sense to me. And it worked out really well for both of us. So, of course, and there's the puppy now. You're very excited to hear. That's Bagel Alonso Cosell. He's loved every minute of this, by the way, of us just being home all the time. He is so spoiled. He's not going to know what to do when things actually do go back to normal. But so when, they announced the schedule, obviously there's 30 games. We try to split them up as evenly as possible. And it just so happened that, there are weekend series and weekday series that lined up, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think there's one that goes to Monday. But other than that, Madi will be able to do her thing on the weekends. I'll do the weekdays. I landed a day job, a stay-at-home job, or work from home rather job during the pandemic that typically requires my attention in the mornings, early in the morning. So it worked out perfectly. We had I think it was like a 3-minute conversation via text. And it was like, hey, how does this work for you? I'm like, works great for me. And then I typed it up, send it over to our bosses. They approved, and that was that.
I can relate to the dogs in the background. I've been working from home through all of this, and I think every single one of my clients has heard both of my dogs at one point or another, usually because Amazon's dropping off a package for my wife. So I can fully relate.
That's been a thing for us as well. Bagel is still trying to acclimate himself. I mean, he's now 10 months old, but acclimate himself to the idea of FedEx or USPS or UPS coming into our driveway. And he's very defensive of us, and we appreciate it, but we need to teach him to tone it down a little bit. These people are here to help. And, we get a lot of packages, in light of everything that's going on. I try to just limit my shopping to the grocery store and everything else, do it online. So yeah, Bagel loves to Zoom bomb and phone bomb whenever he gets a chance. And luckily he's adorable and loving and everyone loves him. So he gets a pass.
I have the same thing with my 5-year-old. She's
Well,
found her way into so many Zoom meetings.
It's really funny. So the job I have, I basically moderate these virtual roundtables in this business to business setting. And so you've got a bunch of these high-end execs from major corporations around the world, and they're having serious conversations about how they're navigating through COVID-19, be it through supply and demand or data intake or, working remotely and stuff like that. And it's been fascinating stuff, but the best parts are when one of their animals or children kind of Zoom bomb in the middle of it, because there they are having these really serious conversations with billions of dollars at stake. And in comes their 2-year-old who's just like, Daddy, I'm hungry. And so, it's one of those funny caveats of this whole thing. But I mean, everyone understands we're working from home. This is not the office. Everyone's at home with you. So, hey, what are you going to do?
So one of the things that I usually like to ask people who are involved in the broadcast field, et cetera, how did you get into this? What made you decide to get into this? But you come with a very interesting background. When did you realize that you had a very important grandfather, and how did that translate into you getting into where you're at now?
Well, I was 5 years old when I realized I wanted to go into this. My grandfather would very graciously have my siblings and my mom And my aunt and her kids come out and stay at his summer house out in West Hampton Beach on the South Shore of Long Island. So we'd spend a couple months out there, and he had a live line to ABC Radio with a microphone, headphones, and everything set up in his bedroom. So he could get up in the morning when he was out there and do his 60-second speaking of everything from his bedroom, which, at this point it was the mid 80s and he had earned his stripes. So he kind of deserved having that luxury. So I always saw the microphone. I was kind of enamored by it, and I didn't know why. And so I asked, Papa, what do you do with that? And he said, well, I do a little thing for the radio. And I said, oh, like what we listen to? That's neat. So I asked him if I could, listen in one day. And so one morning I got up and watched him do his thing, and he put me on his lap. I put on the headphones and did my very first sound check with his producer, Eddie, whose last name is escaping me. And in that moment I was hooked. I was like, that's it. I got to do this. So I knew my grandfather was cool because he was doing something on the radio, and so few people get to do that and reach in such a, especially in such a major market as New York. But it wasn't until I was, 10, 11, 12 that it really started to click, because you don't understand celebrity when you're a child. I would come home from summer day camp, and there would be random celebrities just hanging out with my grandfather, and I didn't know what they were. I came home one day, he was talking with some guy with long blonde hairs and a ponytail, and like jean shorts and a t-shirt. And I introduced, I was introduced to him. My grandfather's like, son, this is John. And I was like, oh, nice to meet you. John. Okay. And then I went and got in the pool, and my brother turned to me, and my brother's, 8 years older than me. And so I guess he was like 15 at the time. He goes, do you know who that is? And I said, not a clue. I said, it definitely doesn't look like a professional athlete. And he goes, you know that song, Living on a Prayer, that's all over the radio? I said, yeah. I said, that's John Bon Jovi. I said, oh. I said, oh, that's neat. How about that? And then I just continued swimming. I was not a big fan of Bon Jovi. So, which I know is blasphemous in New Jersey, but I'm sorry. So I kind of had an idea about it, but it wasn't until, when he passed away when I was about 15 and a half, it really started to sink in. And then at his memorial service later that year, the attendees, it was like, oh my God. And then the real slap in the face was when I was in college, and I was, a radio and TV communications major. And my professor proceeded to teach me about my own grandfather. And that was one of those things where I'm like, and the thing was, he gave me misinformation, and I had to correct him. That was mortifying. And so it was, and then I literally went home or went back to my dorm room, and I called my family. I was like, I can't go in this field. I'm like, Papa's, he's a part of the history in this field. Like, what I'm being taught about him. Like, this is, no, I can't do this. And I literally spent the first 10 years of my life, or the first 8 years out of college, avoiding going to sports broadcasting. I did radio, I did voice work, and I did stand-up comedy and theater. I did everything but sports broadcasting. So yeah, that's when it all really sunk in, and I was like, yeah. So those are some big shoes to fill. So yeah, it was kind of a gradual process.
Well, in those years of trying to avoid it, I know one thing you did, and I'd have to ask you about it because I'm a total SNL geek. I know that you interned for SNL. What was the class that was on air at that time that you were an intern?
So that was the 99-2000 season.
Oh,
so we had we had Will Ferrell, Sherry O'Terry, Molly Shannon, Tim Meadows, Chris Kattan. New that year were Jimmy Fallon and Rachel Dratch. It was a pretty unbelievable cast. Tracy Morgan, who for some reason he and I just totally clicked, and for some even more bizarre reason, 20 years later he still remembers me. Unfortunately, Colin Quinn was doing the news because he was a talentless hack. But man, the thing was, I was convinced going into it that there was no way he rehearsed, because every single Weekend Update he did, he stumbled over. I mean, he couldn't get through a joke. He just flatlined a punchline, and it was just awful. And then I'd see him rehearsing, and I'm like, how is this possible? But yeah, it was an insane experience. And the only thing that I can compare it to is announcing the starting lineups in front of a full ballpark. It's electrifying. It's alive, and it's pretty. There's no way to fully describe it. You just kind of have to be there.
Now, the energy that you find as far as announcing people, the players. I mean, they're used to hearing their names, but now when you did the Call Me Up, Collins, and now with Now on Deck, you're giving everybody the opportunity to know kind of a little bit of what it feels like to be walking to the plate for that big at bat. Talk a little bit about how Call Me Up, Colin evolved into Now on Deck, and a little bit about that for people who don't know about it.
Sure. So by late March, a friend of mine who's the lead play-by-play guy for the New York Riptide, Dave Leno, started doing industry Zooms, and we were all kind of, brainstorming and lamenting about, there being no sports and what are you doing to make money? Because, if your entire livelihood is sports based, well, then your livelihood has been shut down by the pandemic. So I connected with a gentleman named Bruce Silverman, who's the play-by-play guy for Orlando City Soccer Club in MLS. And he asked me, he said, "You ever think about monetizing this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a freelance worker. Like, I don't, I live paycheck to paycheck. Of course I thought about it. And we came to the realization that we could open up a platform online for voices, be it PA announcers, in-game hosts, radio, broadcasters, or even people that just make a living off of voiceovers, and give them a chance to connect with their fans." And so we originally thought of it being sports centric. So we called it Now on Deck because, then you'd be called into the game, and realize that, the people that are being hurt by this are not just sports announcers. And so the whole thing kind of evolved from there. The acronym for Now on Deck is NOD, which kind of perfectly and organically lent itself to what we were doing, because if a coach or a manager puts you in a game, you're given a nod, or the universal sign of respect, even off of the playing field or the ballpark or arena, is, someone gives you a nod, like, nice job. So we decided that's what we would call our recordings, and our talent, roster, we would call them Nodcasters, and all of our social media outlets would be called the Nodcast Booth. So on Twitter, we're at Nodcast Booth, Facebook, same thing, and Instagram. And basically, we wanted to have a three-pronged approach to it. One, giving fans a chance to connect with their favorite voices. Two, giving announcers and broadcasters and voiceover artists a chance to make some secondary income or primary income if they're completely out of work due to the pandemic. And it's all for a nominal fee. But then the third part of it is the portion that we take as a company. We take a portion of our cut, not from the talent, and donate it to COVID-19 relief and disaster relief through rescue.org. So we wanted to make it an all-encompassing thing for the fans, for the announcers, and for the impetus for why we started this, which of course was COVID-19. But once, whenever it happens that COVID is in the rearview mirror, we're still going to stick with rescue.org. We want it to be kind of a philanthropic approach to what we're doing, and again, give announcers some additional income, and give fans something that they can hold on to for the rest of their lives. Instead of a fleeting message on a right field scoreboard, or having their name announced in the ballpark, which of course is cool, but the audio quality is going to be very echoey and what have you. This is yours forever, in top-notch quality. And another thing we do that's kind of different is we will give the opportunity for them to get an audio nod or a video nod. So if they want a personalized video and our talent is willing to do so, they can get that. So it's kind of similar to Cameo, but much more focused, much less the Wild Wild West, and definitely no D-list anybody. So it's, it's something that I'm very proud of, and the fan response has been absolutely tremendous.
Well, as a sports junkie, it's way cooler than Cameo for me. So that's
Awesome.
that's an awesome service that you guys are providing, and the fact that you're also taking the proceeds and you're giving back with it. Just give the name again for everyone on Twitter and your socials.
Absolutely. It's www.nowondeck.com.
And then for folks, if they're not following you, which they should be, what's the best Twitter way to follow you?
You can follow me at Cosell PA, which I realized someone asked me, am I Cosell from Pennsylvania? And I said, no, that's for public address. I suppose I should have just been like Cosell announcer, but then they would have thought it was, someone doing a hack account of my grandfather. So, but yes, it still remains Cosell PA. And for Now on Deck, it's Nodcast Booth.
Well, Colin, I want to tell you, when you first took over, I remember reading an article about your background, and I remember you saying in the article that you were proud of the fact that you did the best impression of your grandfather out there. And I'll tell you, as a Mets fan, that you have definitely found your completely unique voice, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit over the past couple of years.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Very much likewise. And listen, this is a dream job. And it took 38 years to get there, but now I want to stay for as long as they'll have me. And I love this team. I love this organization, and above all else, I love these fans, and love the fact that it's much more hands-on than just some guy in a booth yelling at them for 3 hours.
Well, Colin, we certainly appreciate your time, taking the time out to join us and telling us all about everything that's going on, especially with the baseball being as weird as it is. And hopefully we can check in with you again in the off season. And despite what some people will say about the season, I'd love to hear what will hopefully be your stories of announcing playoff baseball.
I already put it on our calendar when I typed up the split between Marisol and I. At the end of September, the next thing I wrote was playoffs, because I believe in this team.
We do too. Thank you so much for your time, Colin, and really appreciate everything you bring to the stadium. It really is a dynamic presence you have, and we are very, very glad to have it.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. That means the world to me, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Colin Cosell, everybody, on the Happy Recap. Certainly great to have him with us. And Now on Deck is that website again, Now on Deck, and you can find out more about getting your own call-up audio or video. And I was one of those people, EJ, that was able to get one of the Call Me Up Colin call-ups. It took it to give you an idea how many he had to do. I think it was like a 3-month lag time from when I got him the information to then. But that's not a criticism. That just shows how many people were truly into what he was doing. And a lot of fun guy, a really fun guy. And he does a great job out there. He had tremendous shoes to fill. And I think him and Marisol have done a great job in not necessarily making people forget Alex, but, growing on what he had built and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, like I said to him, he's found his completely unique voice, and I always love getting out to CitiField, and it's like, whose day is it? Oh, it's a Colin day, cool. So yeah, he says he wants to be there for the long run. I have a very strong feeling he will get his wish.
Absolutely. Now let's go back to a little bit of on the on-field stuff before we wrap up, EJ. The last thing I wanted to kind of talk about from the game standpoint, specifically last night's game, was Pedro Zamora. And not him necessarily specifically, because I don't want to sound like I'm just outright picking on him. But for somebody who obviously has been brought up to be a left-handed specialist, the 3-out rule, I mean, this is a guy that was not built for this 3-out rule. And certainly for him personally and the situationally, it bit him in the rear last night.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be some of the bump in the road that we're going to see with some of these relievers specifically. You have your old loogies out there, and you want to throw them in just to get that one left-handed bat. Well, not this year. These guys are going to have to learn how to stretch out a little bit. They're definitely going to have to learn how to face right-handed hitters. And it's unfortunate for them because that's not their bag, but it's just all part of learning to play baseball in 2020 right now.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those things. I certainly don't blame Luis for that. I don't think that was bad bullpen management. I mean, obviously it's the end of the game, so you're going to get a little bit more of a leash and not a meaningless lopsided game, which it was at that point. it's one of those things that you just pretty much have to look and go, okay, the role is changing. And I think with all the new rules that have come into play because of COVID, with the the DH, the runner on second and extra innings, etc., we kind of until last night I had almost forgotten about the 3-batter rule, because of course that had come in over the previous offseason and really hadn't come much into use yet during spring training. So it was not quite a surprise to me, but it's one of those that we're going to have to see how they adjust. All the teams really adjust on the fly to what is a lot more significant, I think, of a change than maybe we even gave it credit for as people who follow the game.
Yeah, it definitely didn't see it coming into play as significantly as it did last night, and it's definitely going to feel a lot more significant when it happens in a close game. I think the fact that it was a blowout last night, we kind of overlooked it and said, okay, they're just working it out. But when you start getting into some of these nail biters, that can definitely come up and bite a team in the butt.
I mean, it's right now it seems like the odd men out, and this could be the loogies. And they've been a very valuable role for years, and this definitely could be a continuing issue. Well, we'll certainly continue to keep an eye on that. And the beautiful thing is, EJ, when we next talk, actual baseball will actually be occurring. And I can actually say that in the present time. A few people have asked, I guess they build their calendar around me saying that. All it is a stolen quote from Mr. Baseball, but hey, I'll take it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Opening day, I'm starting to feel the excitement, the energy. I certainly have the optimism that it's going to happen. And, like Colin said, although, if we have him back and they just missed the playoffs, I am going to refer to him as the jinx, having written down a playoff schedule with Marisol. But at the same time, I am equally optimistic about this team's playoff chances heading into the opening day and opening weekend against those pesky Atlanta Braves.
As am I. Next Friday, let's get it going. We hopefully, time we get on the air, we're going to have a nice undefeated record, which will feel like at that point, that will feel like what, 10-0, and because of how much more these games actually count right now. But yeah, I'm definitely all in. I am pumped. I'm psyched for opening day. It's going to feel very different than opening day, but I'm still going to post my James Earl Jones Field of Dreams speech like I do every year. I'm still probably going to play a little element of hooky, even though I'm working from home. I'm going to play hooky on myself, and I'm still going to enjoy the fact that it's opening day, and we weren't sure if we were ever going to get there.
It's one of those things, and I don't say that. I mean, this is a team I think is going to do very well this year. This is a team I think is going to go to the playoffs. It's a team I think that has a serious chance to compete even on a World Series type level because of the fact that we're so well equipped for the DH and so much of a, because of circumstances, an AL type team. But at the end of the day, with how the last 4 months have played out in our society, the last 5 months have played out in our society, I would take 0-60 and still call it a win because baseball is back. That being said, don't you dare come close, guys. Don't you dare come close.
Right. Well, I'm happy to have the 3.5-hour distraction. I'd prefer it to be at the end of the day a happy distraction.
Exactly. And of course, we prefer, we like the recap, but we always prefer the happy recap.
That's it, my friend.
And with that, until next week, I believe our guest will be a returning guest and a longtime friend of ours, Greg Prince from Faith and Fear in Flushing, one of our all-time favorite blogs. Until next week, let's go Mets.